Hi, friends. It's Pastor John Fleming of the Open Door Churches of Salem Kaiser here to bring you our midweek devotional. And this is, of course, the ending of 2020 and the beginning of 2021, a new year. On Friday, we'll celebrate the first day of the year. And for many of us, turning the page on 2020 sounds pretty good. It'll be a little different this year, of course. We won't be able to gather with family and friends like we have in the past. And it'll be interesting to see what happens culturally as many people throughout the world won't celebrate New Year's in the same way that we have. It's a tradition to watch as throughout the world, different time zones celebrate the coming of the new year. But one thing will be the same. And that is that the beginning of the new year will give us all a chance to reflect on what has been and look forward to what will be. So some of us will set deliberate goals for 2021, things that we want to accomplish. And I've known some people who have ritualized that so much in their lives that has become an important part of their identity. In the history of Methodism, the act of covenant making has become a part of what it means to begin a new year. But covenant making is a ritualized way of recommitting to something that we want to do for ourselves. But it's not really about ourselves so much. It's really about what we are hoping to do in order to fulfill our promises to our God. In the scriptures, there are many stories of covenant making, both covenants that God makes with the people and covenants that the people make with God. And covenant was a promise that was sealed in a ritual way, a promise that says, I will do this for you if you do that for me. It was a solemn occasion, and it's one that is sealed in Old Testament times through the sacrifice of animals. You can see that being portrayed in the 15th chapter of the book of Genesis. In that story, Abram receives two promises from God. The first one is to have descendants as many as the stars in the sky. And it says in the story that Abram believed that promise and that was reckoned to him as righteousness. It's the second promise that Abram seems to have a little bit of trouble with. God promises that Abram will inhabit and possess the land that God has shown him. And Abram's response to that second promise is, how will I know that I will possess it? So the Lord instructs Abram to bring the animals for the ritual sacrifice and the covenant making ceremony. And all the Lord does is to tell Abram which animals to bring. Abram knows how to do the rest because this is a cultural covenant-making ceremony that Abram is familiar with in the past. He's probably done it before. He knows exactly what to do with the animals. And so he prepares for that covenant-making ceremony with God. And then Abram waits for the Lord to show up. But instead of having this mutual covenant-making ceremony, God causes Abram to fall into a deep sleep. And while Abram is in this deep sleep, the Lord makes the covenant. The Lord completes the covenant-making ceremony without the other party, without Abram, as if to say, the nature of covenant from this day forward, the nature of the covenant that I make with you is not conditional. It's not conditional upon whether you fulfill your promise or not. The covenant of the Lord is everlasting. It is eternal. It is unconditional. And it is unbreakable. In other words, the Lord redefines the meaning of covenant itself in this story. Instead of a covenant meaning, I will do this for you if you do that for me, God redefines the nature of the covenant that God makes with creation and with God's people. And from that day forward, the nature of that covenant is, I will do this for you, period. Yes, God's covenant is eternal and unending. And God's faithfulness to us is unbreakable. Ours, maybe not quite so much. We have a tendency to make these promises to God. We have this covenant with God that sometimes we don't fulfill, and it's reassuring to know that God's covenant with us will never fail. But it's also important for us to continue to make that covenant, to reaffirm that covenant. And that's how that became part of the Methodist movement and the Methodist practice. Over the next 2 Sundays, we're going to have a couple of chances to reaffirm covenants. The first one will be this Sunday, January 3rd. In worship, we will include some elements of John Wesley's covenant service. His was much more extensive than what we will do in worship. But on Communion Sunday, when we receive the grace of God in the elements of bread and wine, we will also share in some of these ritual acts of covenant making that Methodists have been doing since John Wesley first held a covenant service in 1755. Some of them will be familiar to some of you, and others of you may never have done anything like this before. It's more common in British Methodism than it is in American Methodism, but it has been an important part of many of our practices, many of us who have been lifelong Methodists. The following Sunday, January 10th, we will also remember the baptism of the Lord, and we will reaffirm our own baptismal covenant. Covenant is the nature of our relationship with God and with one another. We are not alone. Thanks be to God.